Thank you, sir. So welcome to this week's TOC. We've got a few items on the agenda. We'll be opening with Greg with the App Runtime Interfaces Working Group update. Then we've got reviewing actions from last week, review of outstanding PRs, charter updates, and any other business. Has anyone got anything to add at this point? I see Ram's been quite busy on the any other business section.
Yeah, a bunch of different things to share.
Cool. Okay, so over to you then, Greg.
All right. Yeah, I'll give it a quick run through of some stuff that's been going on, and then you can ask any follow-up questions you have. I guess as a working group, we still don't really have a centralized roadmap, or we also haven't had a lot of I don't know, I guess use case for a centralized roadmap, since we have kind of a wide variety of different products. But we have been working on some localized roadmaps, specifically for the CLI team. Been working on getting to a point where they have a published roadmap and release process. So some of this was stemming out of some community confusion about when CLI versions would come out. So working on that kind of stuff. We are theoretically starting to transition over to a PR only workflow, but there hasn't really been any enforcement there other than just team process. We haven't turned on any branch protection that wasn't already there or anything like that. And I think part of the reason for enforcement there being a little iffy is we still don't quite, or we still don't have all the GitHub teams worked out perfectly. So we have a bunch of legacy GitHub teams that grant all sorts of permissions to stuff in place, which make enforcement of anything kind of superficial. I think we also have seen recently a bit of drift between reality, like the people actually working on teams, and the approvers. I think we kind of had that jubilee at the beginning where anyone could become an approver. But now that we're starting to enforce some more orderly process for becoming an approver, I think as people rotate internally within their companies or off teams or stop working on Cloud Foundry or whatever, that's led to a spot where we have some people who are approvers who aren't actively working on stuff, and some people who are actively working on stuff who aren't approvers, which has caused a bit of a drift that hasn't actually manifested that much physical pain or that much process pain, since we do have a bunch of these legacy teams that people are able to use as escape valves. I think in general, there's been some confusion around what the process is for adding and removing people from teams. I think understandably, I mean, this is still relatively new governance, and I think we're still even at the working group leadership level, still working on a lot of the details there. But a lot, I think the naive path for a lot of people, or a lot of teams, was, oh, there's a new person who's joined our team, I'm going to submit a PR to add them as an approver for this working group. And that is not exactly the process. So I think there's been some education there for helping codify what that process looks like. I guess as far as projects that are going on in the working group, probably the biggest one that is of most interest that's going on right now is working on Sea of Linux FS4. I think y'all have talked about that a fair bit, and there's been an RFC that Stevenson submitted that was kind of talking about that some. But that is under active development and will hopefully be rolling out to CF deployment later this year. And all the associated build packs and all the associated work that goes along with changing out the stack there. And So I think I was just talking with someone from who's working on that, who ironically is not in the Buildpacks working group because of the aforementioned drift, but they're looking to create a repository for CF Linux FS4 now. So I guess be on the lookout for a PR or issue or whatever to add that coming soon. And then I guess other things that are currently in flight, I think I currently have 3 RFCs open in various stages. I'm guessing some of those we'll probably talk about in more detail later on in the meeting. But I guess I have the role change PR, hopefully to clarify some of the steps necessary for people to gain or lose approver status and contributor status. I have the hot pepper RFC to remove the non-standard teams to hopefully put some more meaning behind the working group teams that we do have. And then my most recent one is I submitted a RFC to talk about the Billpack dependency repositories that are currently chilling on some VMware IaaS accounts that I don't even have access to. That ideally since they are like critical to Cloud Foundry users around the world, hopefully get those into some more Cloud Foundry direct governance there. So those are, I think, the open items that I have.
Do you think, so was the goal to actually move the sorry, I'm rambling a bit. I mean, it sounds like we have an opportunity with the new build packs and the new CF Linux FS4 to build a new build pack caching mechanism and storage, and maybe like we could figure out, rather than moving the existing assets for CF Linux FS3 related build packs, we could just be like, we're going to cut over and new stuff is going to appear over in a Foundation S3 bucket or something like that, right? In theory.
Yeah, so I think there's a number of issues there, which I don't even really get into in the RFC. I think currently there's no stated deprecation policy for anything in the build pack space, which is part of also the reason why this thing has become so expensive, because we just have like an infinite history of assets there. I think this is definitely something that I'd be happy to discuss in the RFC comments. I think the goal for the first step of this is just to move the like gateway over, or the CloudFront distribution over, just since that is the like touch point for
right,
like all the all the downloads for these build pack dependencies. And then there may be future phases of the project to actually address moving over the underlying blobs, or coming up with a more nuanced policy for managing those. But those seem like potentially separate concerns from this. I think
cool.
Maybe the potential counter for that is if the effort of setting up this, cross-account AWS scheme ends up being more trouble than it's worth, then that might be an argument for moving over some subset or whatever to a CFF managed account.
Makes sense.
I guess one of the biggest questions is, what is the likelihood of that AWS account where the bucket is going away?
I think it's unlikely to go away. I think the more likely thing is we will continue to lose touch with it. And so the people who are like actively thinking about build packs, this most recent outage, no one who was in the build packs working group or was otherwise associated with build packs really knew what was going on, because it had drifted so much in time and space. I think there's also some likelihood that not through intentional changes or malice, the team that's managing this is kind of a bit of a holding group. So I think just recently we had an issue with some of the like VMware static sites, where we had some I don't know, Stevenson was more directly involved in this than I was, but some CDN misconfiguration or something like that that led to some outages. So there's always a chance that someone somewhere will accidentally flip something without realizing the implications and then cause an outage.
Yeah, or I guess it gets to the point where it's the long since forgotten that someone then stumbles across and goes, what's this? We'll use the pull the network cable methodology.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is that it's on AWS, so you can only pull virtual cables.
Yes.
I think, you know, there's other potential options here, like potentially we could do some work internally in VMware to transition some of the stuff closer to the Billpack team, still staying within VMware. But it feels like if we're going to do a transition here, it makes sense to take this thing that is critical to the operation of open source Cloud Foundry and move it more towards open source Cloud Foundry. But you know, we have a multitude of other options here if for whatever reason we decide not to go with this RFC is written. We could keep the status quo and just every time the cert is expiring, go through a process with the Linux Foundation to renew the cert. You know, that is potentially fraught with just areas to drop the ball, but it is, you know, a feasible thing we could do if we weren't able to staff this effort or weren't able to get it done in time or whatever other roadblocks might come up, or if it's too expensive, you know, whatever.
I mean, I think we can, yeah, we should definitely explore this during this CF Linux FS4 transition, because like that's the convenient time to change the policy, right? I do think it's a huge bummer that we have this like cache of artifacts that we do on behalf of people. I'm excited about what Paketo has done by saying, no, we're not going to do that. I don't know if that's a feasible approach. That would be a much bigger change. Either switching to Paketo or a similar approach of we don't cache Billpack artifacts on behalf of third parties who are the originators of those artifacts, like, you know, root Golang and ruby.org and all of that, right? Like, why are we caching stuff that doesn't belong to us? Well, because it's really convenient and then it's always there and it's always fast. So we offer a valuable service there. I think we could look at budgeting. The problem is there's no safe time to expire, right? Like whatever you expire, somebody gets a bad day. But like maybe you could argue that an artifact that is more than a year old could be expired or something like that. I don't know, or 2 years.
Yeah.
It still might be a ton of space.
I mean, this is potentially something where, again, if we had more direct access to where these blobs are being stored, then we could make reason, or we could like actually collect data around what the tail on this is. Like I've been talking a little bit with the team that currently manages this, but they are at a bit of a distance from us right now. So, you know, I might be able to even get direct access to the account, but I think there's still some convenience to having the folks who are actually thinking about Billpacks and control of these assets, regardless of what the long-term strategy is going to be for how we handle stuff like this.
Greg, in your current proposal, this is just switching the CloudFront configuration to CFF, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you have an idea of how much that is going to cost? Just doing that step?
So I asked them for an estimate on, unfortunately, it seems like because both that account has a bunch of different CloudFront gateways and different buckets, it was a little bit difficult for them to slice it out, but it looked like the estimate for not including the job, let me reference my conversation real fast, but I think not including the Java distribution, it was like $10,000 a month or something like that for CloudFront. But yeah, it was something in that area. And then if it included also the blob stores, the S3 buckets, then it would be substantially more than that.
Yeah. Especially with the ever accumulating set of assets that's just sitting there.
Yep. So, you know, again, potentially there's some opportunities for saying, hey, maybe we don't need these things from like literally 10 years ago.
Yeah. I'm kind of. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
By the way, just quickly stepping in because it came up as a topic. I was a bit off right now for quickly looking through it. At least for the Pakedo Ruby build pack, there are actually dependency reference to deps.pakedo.io. So it's not that they in general and never actually have something like that. They like even in talking about how to manage dependencies and stacks and other things, they seem to be reorganizing how they want to do it and decouple things from the infrastructure that's used for CF build packs. So there's even some common infrastructure used right now for Pakedo and these for managing dependencies. I quickly skimmed through that. It's not true for Java. I think it's not true for Go. So the third hit I had was Ruby, and there it's true. Like it's downloading bundler from there, for example.
Yeah,
Interesting. Good detective work.
For
Yeah.
what it's for what it's worth.
Another dimension of ancient, let's say, runtimes is the versioning within the build pack itself. So for Ruby, we just recently opened the bug to remove a JRuby version from 2018, I think, last update. So it's a big, well, from security point of view, not really fresh anymore. Removing something is also not easy because there might be somebody relying on it, but well, we have also the old build pack version, so I think it's safe and 4 years old. Sorry, that is not possible, I would say.
The build packs are really cool. I was just thinking about how valuable they are, but they're expensive to store and they are expensive to keep up. You need people that know each language. But like it is kind of the secret sauce. You're like, oh, I'm going to go make my own platform on Kubernetes. And it's like, well, I mean, you can because of Kpack and Pakedo, but without that, it's like, how am I going to build this? Everyone starts building their own Docker images and it becomes a disaster.
I'm kind of wondering if there's any opportunity to take advantage of maybe arbitrarily free asset hosting from GitHub in terms of storing these things. Like how much could we abuse that in terms of putting copies of these things in a predictable location?
Well, I guess it'd come down to GitHub packages, but I don't know if what limits there may be on that one. I know it's quite big on the enterprise level, but I'm not sure if it would be big enough. Do we know how big the S3 bucket is? I'm guessing pretty massive.
I don't have the data off the top of my head, but it must be big.
Yeah, I'm not even sure Amazon trivially gives you that. It's very unfortunate. You could try to figure out the size of an S3 bucket when you have multiple. They'll give you like your storage by account, but not by bucket or something. You have to like count them yourself.
Oh, I thought you could do that with the new dashboard.
Oh, all right. Well, maybe I'll log in. I think I have access to this account, so I could go check it out.
Yeah,
It's
there's some new storage dashboards out.
Anyway, I feel like GitHub has, at least in the past, been fairly accommodating for open source communities, and maybe there's an opportunity to abuse that for massive asset storage that's related to other open source things.
Okay. Cool. Has anyone got anything else for Greg at this point?
One other thing I was curious about, I know that we're doing another stack transition, and when we did the CF Linux FS2 to FS3.1, I recall there being some rough edges around like when the stack was introduced and making it the default, and then especially around removing it, and often platform operators finding it difficult to do that final removal because there was one or two apps that were clinging to CF Linux FS2, really needed it, and so they're kind of getting held hostage by their app teams. Has there been any work to like improve that process or make it a little more granular or nuanced or accommodating?
So I think there's been a little bit of kind of unintentional improvement along the way around making just app management in general easier. Like last time we went through this process, we had the Stack Auditor plugin, but that was building on a lot of experimental APIs. I think this time we've codified a lot of the patterns that Stack Auditor used into actual APIs and CLI commands. So that's something that potentially operators can work on. I think they're like a project that I've been working on a little bit is seeing if there's some other platform improvements we can release concurrent with or ahead of the stack to make that operator experience easier to both understand the state of stack usage on their installments and also like be able to affect that and provide more tools to get non-conformant apps onto the new stack. I don't have anything to share on that yet, but that is an area that I'm thinking about as we get closer to actually releasing this thing.
Cool. Thanks, Greg.
Okay, cool. So moving on to reviewing actions from last week, we've got a TBC that nobody's got the time to look at the moment. But there was one for Stephan to draft a PR for your script as part of the RFC role change process.
Yep, that's done. And it's closely related to Greg's RC with the role change process when we talk about contributors. Everything else is not yet touched. So the script is there. I'm waiting a little bit on some review by Ruben. Maybe next week we schedule a meeting or something like that, because if we agree to merge the role change PR like it is, then we should go with the automation pretty fast, because there's a lot of movement on this, especially contributor and org membership, and you don't want to maintain this twice. And once it is established, I think it should also be easy to add then these it's the generation for the teams according to the charters. Still need to discuss a little bit about the process and this spicy PR, spicy RFC to remove it. But let's say adding the new groups would be something that can be done then pretty easy. And then all the teams have a, let's say, standard layout, standard naming, and that should be done. So it's open, the coding works, you can generate it manually with a file, and the integration into the GitHub action is something I would like to do together with Ruben, because you cannot test that in a PR. I think you have to just enable it and then say that's it, and debug, run it until it works.
Okay, cool, thank you. It's all right, I've just
I could give you the PR in the chat if you want.
It's all right, I've found it, so that's all okay. Okay, cool. So we've got that one. I'm just tagging it as well so that it shows up appropriately. Okay. There we go. And there we are. So that should move over. Come on, are we here? No, it's not refreshed yet, but that's it's all right, because I'm just updating the board at the same time. And yeah, okay, I'll sort that later. So let me just grab that one. There we are, desktop 2. Okay, cool. So well, starting off with the RFC for role change process, which we've kind of done a little bit of a walkthrough already on here. So I think we've got everything ready to actually, and are we now calling this open for the final comment period? Because 3 of us have voted yes on that. And the changes are in 4 days ago. So are we calling that officially open now?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, cool.
I don't know if you really want to press the merge button. Okay, there's no conflict, but maybe a rebase would not harm. I don't know if there's any change in the membership since I rebased it 4 days ago. But if there's no conflict, well,
no conflict.
What can possibly go wrong, right?
Many, many, many things. Okay.
Does
cool.
that button actually have the option to show what it's going to look like? I guess not, right? Anyway.
No, it doesn't. No, I'm not going to hit merge right now on that one. Okay, but I think we're all good with that one. The next
If we
one,
agree to merge, then I could do, let's say, later than a rebase and just merge it. But we should have a quorum, right? First of all, on this.
Don't we have? Am I missing?
No, we have already. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay, then I will take over and merge it later.
Okay, brilliant. The next one, thanks Eric for doing this one, is adding a markdown copy of our code of conduct. So I don't think this should be a controversial one at all. I'm more than happy with it. It's just a reformatted version of what we got. So if people like to pop their thumbs on that, that'd be wonderful. And I don't have the chat window because I'm in screen share.
Merge it. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Done. So that makes life nice and easy.
I think we'll get a little code of conduct badge or something on the community repo at least.
Yeah.
One thing we could discuss in the future is I think you can have an organization-wide .github repo that applies that stuff across all the repos. So it seems to be what the Picado Billpack's GitHub org has done.
Okay.
But this seemed good enough for now in terms of just having a reference markdown copy of that thing.
Ideal. I'm going to skip over the block for the moment because two of them are actually further down in the agenda and the other ones should be relatively swift because Norm's not here. Common stale bot, I'll skip over that one as well as the author isn't joining us this week. So RFC to remove non-standard GitHub teams, which we have briefly touched on. The only thing I've spotted is that there's been a bit of chat on this one in there that probably just needs resolving. The main bit seems to be getting a list of who's likely to be impacted. I don't know how possible this is. Does anyone have a clue?
I mean, we'll probably just need to be at least incrementally pulling that network cable and seeing who's affected in practice. But it seems like there's some things we could do in advance to mitigate this, like if we're auto-generating the actual working group teams and syncing them to the Foundry org. And then, if we know that there's bot activity that needs to be represented in teams, doing that in advance.
Okay. I'll drop Ruben a line over that one to see if there is anything that we can do. Since I'm closer in time zones.
Yeah.
I'll take that as an action.
Also, how dangerous is this really going to be? I mean, we are striving for using a PR model, right? And
yes.
We are allowing people to have forks and open PRs. So we don't block any work. That can't so these issues can be resolved not within hours, but within days, right? To get them their permissions back, because it's about whether they are approvers or not. And actually, there shouldn't be a problem if they are actually approvers. They should be in one of those approver teams. So we might affect work, but in a way that we actually agreed upon a year ago that we want to strive for, right? So yes, you can't push directly to some branch there, maybe, or to at least not to the main branch, but
I guess my only reticence is if we impact, the speed of being able to respond to a CVE.
And I think we should have at least the generation of the proper approver groups automatically in place before we approach all the workgroup leads to clean up the stuff. I mean, it's a bit unfair to ask for cleaning up before the new rights are there.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair.
Maybe let's speed this up and then.
Yeah, maybe once we have those, we could set some more definitive time expectations. Be like, okay, in a month or so, we're going to remove all of the non-standard teams.
Mm.
And so you can start, you've got all the new teams in place, start using those. If you want to be more proactive about that for teams you think you control, start deleting them. But then the wave is coming.
If you have a PR that removes all those teams from whatever YAML files managing it, then it should be somewhat discoverable about what's going away.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So then our next one is generate GitHub Cloud Foundry org members.
That's the PR we talked about.
Yes.
It's a scripting that generates, that automates the Cloud Foundry org membership first. And when this one is in, then I can also generate the teams that is then easy, I would say.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so if anyone would like to have a look at that in advance, that would be handy. Yeah, bit of Ruby and some tests. Marvelous.
Python, not Ruby.
Sorry, yes, it is. But some
Yeah,
tests.
gold star for tests. Good job, Stephan.
Yeah. So that's much better than my PRs. Okay, and we have the Billpack dependency repositories. I think we've kind of covered this one off fairly nicely with it just being moving across the CloudFront distributions. Chris, any thoughts on this one?
I'm just seeing that. Sorry, I missed that 5 days ago. It is certainly possible to contact them and ask them about that. So yeah, let me put that down on my list. I'll do that.
Well, Greg had already pulled up that they can't do that apparently.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's what they say in their public docs, at least. You never know what's possible behind the scenes, but that seemed fairly declarative there.
Right.
And I guess the only other thing is, are CFF LF happy with the additional AWS fees for the CloudFront distros?
Yeah, I mean, we have it in the budget as of right now. I just we'll have to see about that going forward.
Are we sure we remember how big the CloudFront distro was? Did somebody say $10,000 a month? Seems kind of high.
So I looked it up. I can try to track down or see if, or maybe even Stevenson, if you actually have access to this account, you may be able to get more fine-grained details. So it looks like they weren't able to figure out the CloudFront costs for those endpoints specifically, or this distribution specifically. So they just sent me the CloudFront for that entire account, which is 10 grand. Okay. So I don't have a sense of what percentage of traffic that Billpack is. So I guess we could say the ceiling is 10 grand, but it's hard to say beyond that.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So a worst case scenario.
And that would be fine.
Okay. So it sounds sensible then to open this one for a final comment period then in that case. So I'll get that one sorted. Okay. Then in terms of the blocked Stratos, I presume that there's no update there because I don't see norms here. Has anyone heard anything independently? No. Okay, cool. I will stop sharing in that case for the moment. And there we have on the outstanding PRs. So that moves us into the charter updates, which are some blocked PRs. I'll put those in the chat. So thank you very much for raising these. So the first one we've got is proposing using Electo as the system for the election. We've got unanimous TOC support on this one, but we need to get governing board support. That appears to be the slightly sticking point at the moment.
Right. I emailed the board last Friday, and I haven't heard back from anyone yet. I believe we need 3 of the 4 board members to respond back affirmatively. Lee?
Stephan has already ticked.
He did approve both of these charter revisions.
Yes.
I don't know if this is, I mean, that's some good signal. I presume if you needed to call a formal vote of the governing board, then he'd also be an affirmative vote.
Okay. So then we just might need to ping Craig or Alan. Either one of them would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, because that was a question. Am I doing this in TOC capacity or governing board capacity
Both.
or both?
Both, yes. So yeah, I mean, this is something we certainly want to get these merged this week.
Yes.
And yeah, that shouldn't be too tricky. I don't think there'll be any controversy here. So if Stephan already signed off, and then if Lee signed off, then we just need to get Craig or someone to respond via email, or and we should be good to go. So as soon as I get that happen, if I have a problem hearing back from Craig or Alan, David, Eric, I'll ping you to escalate.
Yeah, sounds great.
And I'm going to follow up with them. I need to follow up with them with the minutes from last week's board meeting anyway. So
perfect.
I'll be emailing them later today or tomorrow. And then if we don't hear back by Thursday, I'll ping you all to escalate. So that should be good.
Okay, cool. So that then moves us into any other business. So Ram, over to you.
Hey everyone. So I added a bunch of links to the talk. I think it's most convenient if people take a look at the meeting notes for this. I don't post it in chat, mostly because I'm feeling lazy. But the first set of links that I posted are all about PR that we received in the past week about Corifi. So our PR team put the word out on their usual PR channels with a press release, as well as sent out some information as an invite to investigate a little bit more into what our announcement was and what the tool actually is and where we are going with this. There were a couple of interviews that took place. One, I think, with Chris and Craig, or was it just Craig? I don't know.
Yeah, we both talked to
Frederick
from TechCrunch. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then another one where I was on the call. So the word's getting out. I think we're very happy with the ample coverage that we've received, and hopefully the numbers in terms of visitors and curious onlookers of the project should be upwards. We did get some original coverage as well from a couple of different outlets that summarized some of their ideas, sent us like a few questions over email and things like that. And I think we also managed a French article there. So I didn't know Chris spoke French, but it's all there. So that's one set of links that I wanted to share. The other set was a couple of blog posts that went out late last week and early this week. So these are from one of our own working groups. So Amelia had shared about a couple of new features that were released last week, and I thought it'd be interesting if somebody who worked on the features themselves would come forward to do a little blogging. And so we got a couple of engineers, I think both from VMware, to write a little bit about what the feature was, point to the documentation, throw in some links to the code itself and other things. So this is again targeted towards the community, the present community, and meant for consumption within the community itself. But what I think it represents is people coming forward and assisting in the outreach, which I think is a worthy model to emulate. So top down, if there are folks who you think might be interested or might make a good fit in terms of presenting some of the features that they're working on, I'd encourage people to come forward. And I think as the TOC, you folks have way more visibility than I do in terms of what would be blog-worthy features. So any help that folks on this call can extend towards populating the Cloud Foundry blog is much appreciated. So yeah, those are the two big updates I had. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you very much. David, did you have something? I saw you do a mic.
I did. Okay. I am going to make significant progress this week on this infrastructure moving out of VMware into the Cloud Foundry Foundation proposal. I think I'm realizing it actually breaks into two parts. The first is a budgeting concern of like, how much is reasonable for each working group to spend, and what should a working group feel comfortable deploying a concourse and setting up a whatever, right? That one's a budgeting problem. We kind of have an idea there. The problem is the numbers don't look good. And the reason the numbers don't look good is because of a different problem, right? It's that like CF deployment is extremely expensive to deploy. I'm looking at like huge counts of instances that are by default very large. On AWS, they're all M4 large. On Google, they're all these like non-burstable, large VM sizes, right? Like, and there's a bunch of them. So the cost of these Google deploys is currently, whatever, $1,600 a month. The cost of an AWS equivalent, if we change a couple of things to burstable types, is $1,700. Otherwise, it's even more. You can't even deploy safe deployment on Azure because BOSH deployment doesn't define those VM types. So I'm going to propose two different things. One, and I think they're kind of dependent on each other, right? The first is like a change to BOSH deployment and CF deployment. And like that change would mean that minimal VMs are actually burstable, right? So I would make that change across the board and actually use burstable Google types. And small would actually try to be kind of small too, like to reflect the names, not like, basically what I'm saying is our instance generation and instance choosing is way, way, way out of date from decisions made back in like, 2016, 17, and 18. So I'm going to propose a change here. It is going to be a disruptive change. If you are like using this in production based on these instance types, you'll notice a change for two different reasons. One, we'll start using burstability where we weren't before. I actually think that's okay for these minimal VM types if we're actually choosing minimal correctly to mean really small VMs where it's okay to not have absolutely dedicated resources. I think UAA probably needs to be switched, for example, from minimal to small, but other than that, it's more or less right. And the second change, of course, is reserved instances. If you've actually like reserved a bunch of N1 hardware, reserved a bunch of M4s, and we switch to using M5s for cost reasons and T3s, that's a good thing, unless you've reserved them and you'll have to go back. So we can discuss in the PR about, it might be an RFC because it's going to affect 2 repos or 3 repos. But like we can discuss whether that's an okay change to make. I guess personally, I feel like it is an okay change to make because these are just defaults that are customizable. And I suspect people in production have already customized them and are maybe not running these exact machine sizes anyway. I think the people running these exact machine sizes are the testing harnesses, which are spending money like there's no tomorrow because they like haven't bothered to optimize for the cost because Pivotal and VMware always picked up the bill. So if we start moving this to the foundation, we actually need to do this as a prerequisite. And I prefer it not be optional. I prefer the default install be cheap as we're willing to run it. And then the customizable one is more geared towards, higher throughput.
And isn't that one configuration file you push to BOSH and then it gets picked from there, if I recall correctly?
Right.
So we could even leave this in place as the old default was here.
Yeah.
If you want to do that, then the staying compatible is really just changing to that other file.
Right. Yeah. Or an ops file that makes you go back. This is what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
people often don't pay attention when they're deploying the
Yeah.
default install. And I think the people that are not paying attention are mostly like spinning it up to play with it or test it. And so
Yeah.
we should actually change the default, but have maybe an ops file to go back to the old machine sizes. I don't see a problem with that. I think the permanent change that makes sense is UA uses a lot of resources, so it shouldn't actually be minimal. And it's also kind of a runtime dependency and it's large. Java uses lots and lots of CPU and memory. So like this actually needs to go from minimal to small. But other than that, like it's just that one file other than that. So I think maybe I won't actually, maybe I'll make this a PR to Bosch deployment and we can, you know, talk about it more. It's weird because you make a PR to Bosch deployment and the biggest effect is in CF deployment. And it's like, oh, which working group owns what here, right?
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to do the cost optimization work. We did a whole load of this some time ago to create skinny dev environments by default. And it works quite nicely.
Don't you wish we had done that for you though?
I mean,
open source foundation. Yeah,
that would have been really handy to have skinny dev by default. I mean, feel free to pull it out of the UK PAS repo if you like.
Of course, the other side of cost is instance count, but that actually is an ops file, right?
Yes.
On CF deployment, it's like, do you want to run an HA configuration or do you want to run a 1.1.1 as much as possible configuration? And like that, when you're talking about that, it's not clear to me what the right default is. But we can also discuss changing that as a separate PR.
Mm. The other thing is, are these going to be persistent or are they going to be spun up and down?
Yes. No, I mean, so the budget process is going to, okay, well, so there's consumers of CF that are not us. And then there's us as the consumers of CF. For testing purposes, we have a finite number of authorized permanent CF deployments, and then a much larger number of dynamically spun up and down CF deployments for teams to use. So I'm going to switch to like E-class instances on Google, right? So we don't bypass the sustained usage because we don't need it if we're spinning up a lot up and down, for example.
Okay.
All right, I'll stop sharing. I was just excited. This is the problem I'm excited about focusing on right now. I've been promising to do something about it for a while, but there's a lot of pressure at VMware for me to move some spend around. So I really think it's going to result in me actually having to do this, like at least make this proposal this week, which I'm excited about.
This is exciting. Yes. Thanks for all your work on that.
Okay. Has anyone got anything else? Okay, so in terms of actions from this week, I'm going to talk to Ruben about creating a diff for those affected users. Chris is on contacting the board duty for the charter change PRs, and David's got opening the proposal for instance cost optimization. And who fancies nudging next week's working group presenters?
I can give them a nudge. Would we have App Runtime platform? Are they up next in the rotation?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, sure. I think Amelia might be out on vacation until actually maybe just middle of this week, but I'll check on that.
Yeah, I think her status is 25th of May.
Okay. Awesome. Right. So I've got that captured. So hope everyone has a wonderful week and I'll see you next week all. Cheers.
Oh, thanks.